Good morning. Welcome to the Sunday morning service of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of San Miguel de Allende. I'm Dan Newspiel, the president of your board of directors, and I'm honored to be your service leader today. We're grateful that you've chosen to be with us this morning. We're a nurturing community, and we invite you to bring your whole self, your full identity, regardless of your religious tradition or lack of one, your race, culture, gender identity, or sexual orientation. You're welcome here with an open heart. I'm thrilled to introduce our guest minister this morning, the Reverend Amy Brooks. I had the pleasure to meet and work with Amy when we both served on a ministerial intern committee in Charlotte, North Carolina, about 5 years ago. More recently, I've interacted with her through my participation in online activities of the group GreenFaith, which you'll hear more about today. As a minister, Amy has worked with people affected by HIV/AIDS, has been minister of a UU fellowship, and is currently a community organizer for GreenFaith, encouraging people to change how they live on this planet and with each other. We invite you to look in today's order of service for announcements of activities and membership information. The same information appears in our weekly newsletter, along with interesting articles about our busy fellowship. If you're not already on our mailing list, please send a note to Denise at the address in the chat box, and we'll add you to the list. This week, in the 10th installment in our continuing series on our Magic Fellowship, we invite you to take a very short quiz. Our Zoom breakout discussions after the service are great places to reflect on this service with old and new friends. Just stay connected after the music ends, and you'll be randomly assigned to a room. If only one or two people show up in your room, sit tight for a minute, and I'll move you to a larger group. At the end of the service, we'll pose a question to kick off your discussion. And now, a few thoughts from our COVID-19 task force, a group of health professionals and care team members with expertise we hope will be helpful during this pandemic. Though cases and deaths continue to rise in San Miguel as well as in the US and Canada, I have a little good news. Wiping down groceries, mail, and other items entering your house with alcohol or quarantining them for several days is probably not necessary. Actively infectious coronavirus has not been demonstrated on these items. Your most important protection from getting infected by contact is frequent hand washing, especially after handling something that was recently touched by someone from outside your household. There'll be more on how coronavirus spreads in tomorrow's newsletter. Be safe and be well. And now to Reverend Amy Brooks.
Good morning, friends. It is so good to be with you. I'd like to begin our time together with some lovely words written by a colleague of mine, the Reverend Laura Bogle, who lives just over the border from me. She's in Tennessee and I'm in North Carolina, and now over the borders to each of you. It is entitled, "This is Our Home, but Not Just Ours." We gather here to remember this is our home, but not just ours. This land we live on, this water we drink, this air we breathe, these old mountains that hold us steady to our ground, these forests that give us their healing green, these flowers that give us their beauty and fragrance, these fields that give us our daily bread, these stars that show us our place, the wilderness and the tame backyards, all of it our home. We remember the ancestors who have lived on this land and who have shaped it, the Catawba and the Cherokee of North Carolina, the people native to the lands upon which you now reside. Did I suddenly mute?
You're okay now.
We remember the ancestors who have lived on this land and who have shaped it, Catawba and the Cherokee of North Carolina, the people native to the lands upon which you now reside, the settlers, the farmers, the hunters, the immigrants and artists, the families, the explorers, the business people, the engineers, the builders, the families, the teachers, the scientists, the workers, the leaders. We inherit their choices. We honor the animals and creatures that have made their home in this land, the ones here now and the ones that used to live here. And we envision the future generations who will live on this land and let their voices fill our hearts. We gather here to remember this is our home, but not just ours. I invite you to please join me in the lighting of our chalice. We light this chalice with grateful hearts for the mystery of life and the miracle of love, for the beauties of nature and the blessings of community, for the inward journey of the spirit and the outward journey of action. Like a flower that opens to the dawning of a new day, we turn to greet the spark within each one of us, light for one another and the world. Our opening hymn is number 347, Gather the Spirit. Let's join in singing as we are able, and you will find the words on the video on your screen.
Please let us join together in reciting our spoken covenant, first in English. We respect the interdependent web of life and work for a just and peaceful world. We encourage the search for truth and meaning, strive for compassion in our relationships, and seek values that will benefit our lives and the lives of others. This is our covenant.
Respetamos todos los estilos de vida dentro de su red interdependiente y trabajamos por un mundo justo y pacífico. Alentamos la búsqueda de la verdad y la comprensión total. Nos esforzamos por mantener compasión en nuestras relaciones y buscamos valores que beneficien nuestras vidas y las vidas de los demás. Este es nuestro convenio.
Our fellowship strives to support each other and our surrounding Mexican community by supporting worthy organizations with at least half of our income, especially during these difficult times. If you value these services, please remember that they are not fully paid for by our membership pledges, and we rely on your weekly donations to help us in the work we do. So we'll pause here to let you connect to our donation link, which you'll find in the chat box or on our newly designed website, UUFSMA.org. You can use PayPal or credit or debit cards. For alternative ways to donate, please contact me in the chat box or by email. And thank you for your generosity.
Good morning. I'm the Reverend Tom Rossiello, the minister of this fellowship, and we now enter into a very sacred time in our service, a time when our members and friends share the joys, the sorrows, the concerns that they are experiencing with their community. If you have a joy, sorrow, and concern that you'd like me to share in a future service, please email it to me. If you wish to share something today and have not emailed it in advance, you may do so by typing it into the chat now. Our first candle is from Nora Cohen. Nora's husband, Mickey, turns 99 today, and they will have a low-key celebration with chocolate cake and a Zoom call with family. And this is a happy birthday candle for Mickey. Another joy. Recently, 2 of our very active members have safely returned to San Miguel. This is a welcome home candle to Patricia Scott and Kathleen Bennett. Louisa Field would like us to light a candle for all the children who were separated from their families at the border and who still are in detention with little hope of being reunited with their families. October is Domestic Violence Month. Domestic violence, especially violence against women, occurs everywhere, but we know it is a particular problem here in Mexico. This is a candle of hope, solidarity with, and healing for all victims of domestic abuse. Another candle of concern for the ongoing efforts to suppress the vote in the United States, and one of commitment to support all those organizations, including our own UU the Vote, who are working tirelessly to get out the vote and make sure that every vote counts. Another candle of great concern for the rising number of COVID cases here in Mexico and in the US. We remember with sympathy those who have been lost to this disease, and we send get well wishes to those who have the disease now. Most of all, we pray that people will continue to socially distance, wear masks, and do those things that protect themselves and others. And this is a final candle for all the joys, sorrows, and concerns held deep in our hearts, but which remain unspoken this morning. We hold them all collectively in our hearts as now we go to the Reverend Amy Brooks to lead us in this morning's time of reflection, meditation, and prayer.
Thank you, Reverend Tom. Friends, please join me. Let's begin with just a few deep breaths. Breathe in, breathe out. Get comfortable in your seat. Sitting a long time is hard on the body. Close your eyes if you want to. Wiggle your toes. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. Breath of life and love, be among us and sustain us always as we engage in the joys and sorrows of daily living. We acknowledge the hurt and pain so many feel in the face of COVID-19 and other illnesses. In the face of injustice, violence, and oppressive systems. In the face of loneliness, hunger, war, natural disasters, and every kind of need. We pause for a moment in silence. We acknowledge now, too, the wonder, joy, and gratitude we find in the smiles of loved ones, in the celebration of accomplishments great and small, in the recognition of mercy, forgiveness, and grace that we receive as gifts from one another. There are many things on our heart this day, but today we lift up a special prayer of concern for the upcoming election in the United States. We hope that wisdom will prevail, justice will be served, and that patience and unity will flow among us. Breath of life and love, be among us and sustain us for the living of these days together. Amen. Our next song was shared with me by a neighbor who knows I care a whole lot about the environment. And this song has become something that I listen to when I need a little inspiration. It's a recent release by Lisa Schneckenberger titled Labor On. We have the video to share, and you can find the lyric printed in the order of service.
Overtakes you and you shiver in the cold when disparity wakes you and you know you must be bold when you put your body on the line. Don't hesitate in fear. We know the train, it is coming, it is near. Labor on, my children, labor on, my friend, labor on, my children. We will not let this be the end. When they dig the earth and turn it into dollars to be made, you can't help but try to save her. For her sake, don't be afraid. While the fire it rages onward, burning everything it sees, and destruction consumes our decency. Labor on, my children, labor on, my friend, labor on, my children. We will not let this be the end. When the powerful corrupt us and complacency sets in, they'll distract you, they'll placate you, but we cannot let them win. With each step we take together, we are stronger by the hour, and we are rising, we are shining, we have the power. Labor on, my children, labor on, my friend, labor on, my children. We will not let this be the end. Labor on, my children, labor on, my friend, labor on, my children. We will not let this be the end.
Thank you. So this reading by Denise Levertov is a reading that's been with me a really long time. I think the very first time I ever preached on the environment, it was my reading. And so it clearly has stayed with me, and I share it with you this morning. It is in our hymnal, so I expect some of you may have heard it before. It's entitled Beginners by Denise Levertov. But we have only just begun to love the earth. We have only begun to imagine the fullness of life. How could we tire of hope? So much is in bud. How can desire fail? We have only begun to imagine justice and mercy, only begun to envision how it might be to live as siblings with beast and flower, not as oppressors. Surely our river cannot already be hastening into the sea of non-being. Surely it cannot drag in the silt all that is innocent. Not yet, not yet. There's too much broken that must be mended, too much hurt that we have done to each other that cannot yet be forgiven. We have only begun to know the power that is in us if we would join our solitudes in the communion of struggle. So much is unfolding that must complete its gesture. So much is in bud. Before I get started, I want to thank Dan and Tom for inviting me. I meant to do this at the beginning, and to the great team that helped put this service together. It's really been wonderful, so thank you. In the fall of 2017, I was living for 4 months in the south of India with my 9-year-old daughter and a group of college students that my husband was leading on a semester abroad. While we were excited about the trip, that year had brought some pretty big disappointments, the death of my mother, and a new president in the White House. So there was a good portion of heightened anxiety about the state of the world, mixed in with what we had hoped would be a grand adventure. And so it was in the wee hours of one morning in the guest house at Madras Christian College, unable to sleep. I was watching videos of fire ripping through the hills of Northern California with a sense of doom. The world in which I had thought I was raising my daughter seemed to be slipping away. I was frightened. It was hard to feel hopeful. When I was 13, I had a dream. In it, my family had stopped at a gas station, except we were not filling up with gas. We were filling up tanks with air so that we could breathe. With friends now evacuating in Colorado and with the ash-filled air of San Francisco last month, this does not always seem like a dream anymore. Now, I wish I could say that I was as smart and savvy and bold as Greta Thunberg and that I jumped right up and started a movement. But alas, as we know, I did not. My path was different, and I didn't really get involved in climate work until much later. Like many of us, I have done the usual and obvious things to reduce, to reuse, and recycle. I've made changes in my choices, like switching to bar shampoo and shopping at the farmer's market. I've been blessed recently with the ability to put solar panels on our house, but still the fires of California and Colorado are clear. Not yet, not yet. There is too much broken that must be mended. Shortly after we returned to the United States, I received a call from the executive director of GreenFaith asking me if I would like to help organize people of faith in North Carolina to address the climate crisis. Of course, I said yes. I had been a GreenFaith fellow some years earlier, but as so often happens when it comes to issues of creation care, other things in life take priority. When I talk to people, I am struck by all the ways in which we numb ourselves and feel defeated by this issue. We say things like, my little efforts won't make a difference. I don't know where to start. It is such a big problem. Why should I deny myself the nice car, the fancy trip when everyone around me isn't doing so? And then always this one. The outcome of this rests in the hands of government and big corporations. That's where we need to put our energy. That's what needs to change. GreenFaith has spent years educating and encouraging people to dig deeply into the teachings of their respective faiths about the environment and to put these teachings into action. The call has been to green our faith. Together over these many years, we have learned about carbon footprints and LED lights. We have celebrated Earth Day in our sanctuaries and in the streets. We have encouraged people to write letters to newspapers, organized resistance to the fossil fuel industry, and helped people find ways to put solar panels on their roofs. And still, not yet, not yet. There is too much broken that must be mended. Realizing this, GreenFaith has started asking some different questions. Like, how do we inspire people to change how they live on the planet? And how do we move people from a society based on industrial, endless growth to one that focuses on a balanced and sustainable ecosystem? Or in the words of Buddhist scholar, teacher, and activist Joanna Macy, how do we bring about the great turning? It's a huge challenge, rather like moving a mountain. But as the Confucian saying goes, if you move a mountain one stone at a time. And it does not have to be about picking up stones and just putting them somewhere else. It can also be about creating something new. So here are some of the stones I have been collecting. First, think about the children. My most powerful motivator is my daughter. I want desperately for her to live a beautiful life, not one full of fear. And as I've aged, it seems there is some freedom and wisdom that comes with that. I am much less focused on what I can get for myself and much more focused on those who come after. As the native people say, think in terms of the 7 generations. Sometimes when I bring this up, people express that it feels like they're getting cheated. But does giving up some things, does it have to be a burden? Could it not also be a joy? Living in harmony with nature could make our lives fuller and richer. It could also make them a lot more simple, leaving time to develop relationships rather than trying to keep up with the next thing we need to do or own. We might become aware of the ways in which our ego and self are being caught up in desire and greed, causing suffering and unhappiness, rather than being joyful. We may find deep satisfaction that our behavior is in keeping with our values, our spiritual values, to cause no harm, to create no waste, to respect the inherent worth and dignity of every person. We could deepen our sense of unity and compassion for one another and for the earth. I think there's freedom and joy in aligning our values and our actions. Another stone is to articulate an alternate vision to the one I had in my dream all those years ago. Here's the vision statement that our GreenFaith team wrote together last year. We envision a world transformed, in which humanity in all its diversity has developed a shared reverence for life on earth. Religious and spiritual communities everywhere generate a moral awakening to the sacredness of the earth and to the dignity of all people. Together, we are building resilient, caring communities and economies that meet everyone's needs and protect the planet. The era of conquest, extraction, and exploitation has given way to cooperation and community. The good life is one of connectedness with each other and with all of nature. It is a world of flourishing life that replaces despair with joy, scarcity with shared abundance, and privilege with justly distributed power. I think that's just beautiful. I know, it's a big dream, maybe an over the rainbow kind of dream. But what do we have to lose? And it gives me hope. Another stone for me is to ground myself in my spiritual practice, one that allows me to feel connected to the larger world. I think especially in this time of pandemic, when so many of us are feeling cut off from our faith communities, and even our friends and family can feel distant, finding ways to connect have become even more important. For me, as a person of faith, who takes seriously our seventh principle about the interconnected web of all creation, it's vitally important for me to feel connected to the trees and the plants and the animals, the air, the water, the land, my food. Macy understands this as a dissolving of the small sense of self contained by our physical body, so that we can understand that we are much bigger, both in body and in understanding of self. One way to do this is to remember that we are breathing in reciprocal relationship with the trees. For every breath I take in, I am literally pulling in what the breath of the tree that was just let out. Similarly, when I breathe out, I am providing life for the tree who breathes in. When I think about that and live in that, it makes cutting down even one tree a much more serious action. As Levertov said so eloquently, we have only begun to envision how it might be to live as siblings with the beast and flower. And so my last stone is to find our people. Who are the ones who will accompany us on this journey? Learning something new is not always easy. Changing something we've been doing for a very long time is even more difficult. That is why we usually do these things in groups. Even before the pandemic, people were not likely to have strong groups of people in their lives working on an issue like climate justice. We also tend to have groups and projects that we work on out there somewhere, like problems that we can go and fix. It is so much harder to understand and bring these into our own daily context. What would it be like to have groups that help us actively resist material acquisition, or to help us become a vegan, or to find ways to incorporate biking and walking, not for exercise, but as a way of life, to practice taking what we only need and to share from our abundance. Too often, our faith communities feel siloed, and the issues sometimes appear to be in competition. Scattered among a variety of issues and across geography, we live here, we work there, and play and worship somewhere else. It is time, I think, to articulate clearly that every issue is an environmental issue. Healthcare and housing are environmental issues. Education is an environmental issue. Race is an environmental issue. Transportation and access are environmental issues. Pandemic is an environmental issue. We must bring this lens to every aspect of our lives. The history of the exploitation of the land and people go hand in hand. It's not one without the other. It is one story told over and over and over in 1,000 different ways. GreenFaith recognizes the interlocking nature of all these issues, which is why we are actually right now working on the election, encouraging people to bring their power and their values to the polls. And GreenFaith rests on these stones I mentioned. We bring people together around a common vision. We encourage people to dig into and develop their spiritual grounding. We are actively creating community and finding ways for each of us to take action for a future that works for all. How does this happen? Specifically, over the last year, we have been studying change and what we think can contribute to the effort of transforming the world in which we live. We are talking to people around the world, from France to Brazil, from the United States to Nigeria to Indonesia. We hear that people are hungry for this transformation. People in the global south are many years into understanding and experiencing climate change, which leads to food shortage and unrest. Those of you living in Mexico, I expect, are well aware of the impact on local populations as people move north, hoping to enter the US in search of stability. These conversations are not always easy. It means we have to talk honestly about what we face and deal with difficult situations and some raw feelings. But as I learned long ago from my years serving people with HIV and AIDS, not talking about something doesn't make it go away. In fact, silence and denial are deadly. The conversations may be challenging, but they can also open up new possibilities. So that is why we at GreenFaith are committed to talking honestly about the situation and using what resources we have to engage in protecting the most vulnerable among us and supporting people to make real changes in their personal lives, their institutions, and the laws and policies that uphold our current systems. Let me say that again. We are committed to supporting people to make changes in their personal lives, in their institutions, and in our collective systems. Change does not happen on one level. It must address all three, because these spheres of influence are interlocking and they feed each other. It also means, despite what we sometimes think, your individual decisions do matter, even if you don't see the outcome immediately. Embrace it, don't dismiss it, and don't stop there. Not yet, not yet. The way we are imagining doing this is by creating what we are calling circles of care and resilience. Really, it's just small group ministry writ large. Circles can be in a neighborhood or among friends. You can have a circle at school, at your workplace, and yes, in your faith community. Each circle can find its own project to work on. Maybe one circle will be focused on a community garden, while another is working with a mosque or school to realign spending priorities to support green practices. And yet another is training advocates to speak to community leaders. All of these are individual grassroots action happening in different spheres of influence. Just this week, our Central Bergen Circle in New Jersey defeated a plan to put a power plant in their community. Coming together, we can move mountains. The kind of change we hope to see will only come when enough people from the grassroots demand it. Corporations will only change, laws will only change when enough people have said enough. As Levertov notes, we have only begun to know the power that is in us if we would join our solitudes in the communion of struggle. This is how change happens, when people of faith and spirit come together and organize. It's not an unfamiliar story, and that too should bring us hope. Social movements have always relied on people of faith and spirit of every type, and we can easily call their names: Moses, Jesus, the Buddha, King, Gandhi, Mandela, Tubman, UUFSMA, and Thunberg. But they all needed the people to rise up with them, willing to inconvenience themselves, willing to change and to grow, to make the vision a reality. Friends, I know this is an overwhelming time for so many of us. For some of us, we see the systems on which we have counted for many years coming apart. But maybe that is what needs to happen. The system we have is not sustainable, and it's really only working well for some of us. I would consider myself one of those people for whom the system has worked. But when it comes down to it, despite my own fears, I really don't want a system that only works just for me or a few of my closest friends. Blogger and teacher Cynthia Oselli writes, "For a seed to achieve its greatest expression, it must come completely undone. The shell cracks and its insides come out and everything changes. To someone who doesn't understand growth, it would look like complete destruction." My friends, as we think about the days and weeks ahead, specifically our upcoming election, I think we must be prepared for further confusion. And so today, I encourage you to ground yourself in your most deeply held beliefs. Find your people and your community, even if it's virtual, and hold on to your vision. And please, please know that the work you have done on so many issues is bearing fruit, because we are rising, we are shining, we have the power. People, including young people, are marching in the streets. I have seen them, and they are voting. Do not be deterred. Hold on to your hope. Hold on to hope even in things unseen. And let us join hands and hearts in the greatest struggle and the greatest opportunity that our world has ever seen. We have only begun to imagine justice and mercy. We have only begun to love the earth. So much is unfolding that must complete its gesture. So much is in bud. May it be so. Friends, I invite you now to join me in a responsive reading. We're going to do this with just a very simple spoken response. I'll read the first sentence and then we'll all read together the response. So here's the response. We join with the earth and with each other. Say it together one time. We join with the earth and with each other. This prayer is entitled Prayers of the People. It's from the UN Environmental Sabbath Service, Earth Day, 1990. And it goes like this. To bring new life to the land, to restore the waters, to refresh the air, we join with the earth and with each other. To renew the forests, to care for the plants, to protect the creatures, we join with the earth and with each other. To celebrate the seas, to rejoice in sunlight, to sing the song of the stars, we join with the earth and with each other. To recall our destiny, to renew our spirits, to reinvigorate our bodies, we join with the earth and with each other. To recreate the human community, to promote justice and peace, to remember our children. We join with the earth and with each other. And now this closing line. We join together. as many and diverse expressions of one loving mystery for the healing of the earth and the renewal of all life. May it be so. Friends, our closing hymn is the wonderful song, Come Sing a Song With Me. It's number 346, and you will see the video of a song sung by a virtual choir. So I invite you to sing along as you are able. May the rose rise to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face and the rain fall soft upon your fields. Until we meet again, may the love of this community and the great Mother Earth hold you and keep you. Blessed be.
My mother, when love is gone, my mother, when love is gone, in our darkest hour, hope lingers on. My father, when peace is gone, my father, when peace is gone, in our darkest hour, hope lingers on. I will not hate, and I will not fear in our darkest hour. Hope lingers here, my sister, when equality's gone, my sister, when equality's gone, in our darkest hour, hope lingers on. My brother, with tolerance gone, my brother, with tolerance gone, in our darkest hour, hope lingers on. I will not hate, and I will not fear in our darkest hour. Hope lingers here, my love, when honor is gone, my love, when honor is gone, in our darkest hour, hope lingers on. My country, When justice is gone, my country. When justice is gone, in our darkest hour, hope lingers on.